agenda. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We've had some great discussions today about photography and music, and now it's time for the fashion. I'm very excited about it. Just to give you a little overview of who I am. That's if you didn't hear me reel this off earlier already. My name is Annalise Days. I have been modelling for the last 20 years or so. I was on Britain's Next Top Model, America's Next Top Model, and now I host, I'm a presenter, thoroughly enjoy talking. I work for Heart FM and do a show on Fridays and Saturday nights, and fashion is in my blood. So that's why I'm very excited to be here today. My aim today is for us to have an open, honest discussion, hopefully give some advice and hopefully inspire some of these young people on their journey on hopefully to get into the fashion industry. But this is definitely a safe space, so if you have any questions or you don't know what we're talking about, feel free to put up your hand and I'll come over to you for your question. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end as well, so if it's not a burning desire, you can hold on to it until the end of the session. So, to get going, I think that it's really important that my lovely panel guests here introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. Why don't we start all the way on the far left? Let's go.
Okay. My name is Fode Dumbuya. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Fode Dumbuya. I'm the designer and founder of Labrum. So Labrum is a menswear brand and it's been going for 4 years. Prior to that, I used to work for Nike as a bespoke designer. My concept is more about talking about my story, my journey to life. So that's what I use on telling the story on textile. It's helped me gather a lot of pace around London and Japan at the moment. So I'm here to basically talk to you guys about my journey, and you can ask me whatever question you want to. We can talk it through. So I'm going to just be brief so that I can give the other guys a chance to talk about themselves a little bit.
You can have a panel discussion by yourself. A nice chat. What about you?
My name is Aisha Akambi. I'm a fashion stylist and a writer. I style mainly people within music, generally menswear, and I write a lot about life and different aspects of it, including fashion and culture and things like that.
Nice. And what about you, Harry?
So my name's Harry Rose, and I have a slightly different background to these guys. I am a body acceptance coach, and so I talk a lot about body positivity, body confidence, self-acceptance, mainly on Instagram. But yeah, I also work one-to-one with people on body acceptance and in workshops and all those kind of things. So slightly different background, but to hear, to talk about the
lots of positive stuff over there. I like it.
Yeah.
And what about you, Olivia?
Hi, I'm Olivia Gold and I'm a brand marketer and fashion influencer. So I do marketing for Debenhams in the women's wear and menswear division, all kind of doing all their campaigns. I also run a platform called Life of a Marketing Girl, which empowers, educates and encourages women specifically to get into marketing within the creative industry. So that includes fashion, music, like entertainment, and I'm also a lifestyle blogger, so I blog fashion and lifestyle trends. So a whole heap of fashion stuff.
We've got a lot of busy people up here. I like it. Definitely in great company. Let's jump straight in. Fashion and identity. How important do you think the style and the way somebody dresses reflects their identity? Feel free to jump in, anyone. I can be brutal and point, but I won't. Olivia.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's important if that's something that you care about. I don't think it should be forced upon anyone, firstly. But I feel like it's self-expression. It's like a part of you personally, like the way you like your hair, is like an example of expression. So I feel like fashion and style is really, like another avenue. It's just like another outlet. So for me, that's just something that I've always enjoy, just seeing like my mother and my aunties be really trend forward, and I think that was just something that I kind of caught on to. So I think it's really like a personal experience more than anything, so that's how I see fashion and style.
Yeah. And Harry, how would you add to that?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it's self-expression, creativity. I guess my experience is slightly different because of some of the people that I work with who perhaps don't have the highest self-esteem, perhaps are a bit afraid to express themselves how they would like to. So I think that it's not necessarily intrinsically linked to identity and style. That's the kind of angle that I kind of come from. However, I personally love expressing myself through fashion. It's definitely
No, you've got a flower in your hair.
I
Pink
know,
hair, I love it.
I know, exactly. So yeah, I think that maybe just to be aware that not everybody is expressing themselves on the outside, how they feel on the inside.
I think that's a really important point to make, actually, because I could have ignored that almost.
Yeah.
Without. I think that's why it's so important to have a diverse panel, because you just hear lots of different aspects on something that you thought was so one-sided.
Yeah.
How would you say that fashion relates to people's identity?
I think style in particular, maybe more so than fashion, is like your hello before you speak. It's like an aesthetic language. And I think if you haven't spoken to someone and you look at how they dress, that communicates a lot of silent messages about maybe what music they're interested in and where they hang out. And it's a way of aligning yourself. It's a way of looking for acceptance, I'd say. It's a way of trying to search for belonging within certain subcultures.
And Fode, do you have anything to add to that?
I do agree with Aisha. Yeah, it's all about expressing yourself. You can look at someone, the way they dress, you can completely tell what they're into, what they like, and how they express themselves. And it's the same way we, as a designer, we go out, look at people's and take a lot of pictures, and it paints a picture as to how people look at things in life. For example, if they're into certain music, you can just tell that it's like a subculture. Like you can see, we use this as an inspiration. So, yeah, definitely. It's more about style than fashion for me. So I look about style because that stays forever. Then fashion changes with trends and stuff like that. So yeah, I totally agree.
And is that how you would identify style versus fashion, just for anybody who might be interested?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'll identify that through people expressing themselves. Because it doesn't matter if it's something on trend. You meet people on the road sometimes, they just dress the same way since like year one, since you've known them to like the 10th year. All they do, they just express themselves. It's the way they feel. It's their mood when they wake up in the morning. And then they just wear whatever mood they're into. So for me, those are the people I look forward to for inspiration.
Definitely. Yeah. It is all about, when you're talking about art forms, music, fashion, etc., it is a lot about the inspiration behind it all. I would love to find out from you guys what it is that inspired you to get into what it is that you do. I'm going to go back over this way and go for you, Harry. That's what I do, you see. I just,
Sure.
What is it that made you decide to do what you do? How did you get into being a body positive coach?
Well, I basically was a super insecure teenager. I was really, really insecure about my body, and that kind of led to a kind of undiagnosed eating disorder and just all shades of kind of sad. But that's not to say I wasn't confident on the outside, but on the inside I was really, really insecure. And then through my 20s, I actually became a massage therapist and learned how amazing our bodies actually are, and kind of learned how just to kind of, from a functional perspective, just like, wow, bodies are amazing. And then body positivity was kind of like coming through, and I basically got really into the activism side of body positivity, which I think is kind of often neglected. And I trained to be a health coach as well, and often the diet culture and wellness are kind of linked. And I basically just got a bit disillusioned with how we're all meant to look a certain way, and often wellness is kind of meant to be thin and often white, and I just was like over it. And so then I just fully accepted body positivity, and it's just, there's such a need for people to embrace what they look like as they are now without having to change themselves. And I'm so grateful to be here to be able to talk about that, because I think fashion and how you express yourselves is intrinsically linked.
Totally.
But society tells us we have to look a certain way. And I think that when we talk about style can be, there's endless styles, right? And it's getting people to accept the fact that you can dress how you want to, regardless of what your body looks like. And so, yeah, that's a kind of
Yeah.
long
I
arch
like
of-
those though. Because
Yeah.
it gives, I think it's a nice insight into what drove you into it.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
pass the same question over to you, Olivia. What inspired you to get into what you do?
It was like two sides. I was always interested in brand and like strategy when it came to business, but I've always had a love and passion for fashion. So I kind of researched and was just like, is that a lane for me to have like a long career? And I found out it was, and I thought it was important because in fashion, I think storytelling is really important, and you do that through marketing in terms of how you sell the collection, what is the meaning, and you know, like ethics and just kind of birth of it. So that's how I kind of got into it. But I started off originally doing marketing at uni, but then once I graduated, I went into PR. So I did public relations, just interning at different agencies, and just understanding how do brands get their collections in in the media. I personally kind of got bored of that lane. And I wanted to get more behind the strategic point of view, and then that's when I moved over into marketing, and then worked in an agency where it wasn't specifically fashion, but was just more lifestyle based. But I've always had fashion experience, just like blogging, and just like general like networking, and then I worked in house for Needle and Thread, which is a women's wear fashion brand, and then from there I went to Debenhams.
Nice. And it shows you as well how there are so many options that brush alongside the fashion lane, if that makes sense. It's not just about, oh, you work in fashion, that means you're a model, you're a designer, you're a this. It can be so varied in the world of what's actually included in that. Aisha, I would love to know your story, stylist. Tell us.
Yeah, I got into styling maybe because not necessarily anything about fashion, but I understood what perception could do. I understood by presenting yourself in a different way that might open up opportunities and experiences that you may never have had. And so I grew up in Southampton with not many people that looked like me, in terms of the way that I dressed myself, which was quite androgynous, and the culture that my parents come from, which is Nigerian culture, weren't necessarily very well versed in that kind of aesthetic. And so I often felt, I wouldn't necessarily say isolated, but I wanted what I was doing to not be so weird. I didn't want it to be so strange. And anyway, I moved to London to go to university. I was working in retail, and people would come into the shop that I worked in at the time. And because I had quite an eccentric style, more so back then, people would always ask me what I did. You know, everyone assumed I must have done something outside of the retailing job I had. And I'd heard about styling, didn't know much about it, but I thought, you know, I like dressing myself, you know, maybe this is something I could potentially do. And so after a while, when people kept asking, I was like, I'm a stylist.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm a stylist.
You've got to put it out there, haven't you?
Right, you kind of have to speak it into existence. Yeah. And not long after that, I met Labyrinth before he was famous, before he did anything, just before Tiny Temper's sort of pass out moment. And I suggested to him that I should style him, and I did. We went through a lot of styles before we found the one that worked, and he eventually got signed to Simon Cowell's label. And from there, I've just kind of gone ever since. But it was more about trying to make urban music, for want of a better word, in the UK. I wanted to make it transcend just the UK. You know, I wanted to see if maybe perhaps dressing it differently might make it appeal to different audiences and maybe travel across seas. So that was my entry point.
And that seems like a great goal as well. I feel like it's always nice to look at it, again, from a different perspective, that it's not just about, here I am and this is what I'm wearing. It's more like what I'm trying to do through my clothing. That is exactly why I love fashion and style, by the way. It's like my heart's beating thinking about it. Fode, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, my journey is quite a peculiar one, to be honest.
We like that.
Right. So yeah, my journey has started from Nike. Well, I'll say I studied design at uni, but I wanted to do fashion. But as you know, as African parents, if you tell them you wanted to do fashion, they don't think you're serious. My mom, my dad dismissed that. So my way of through fashion is to say I'm going to do something science, which was like information science and design. So it sounds well to my dad. So I did that, but I was working in fashion. I was working for DKNY. So after that, I did 3 years of my degree, and I used the graphics design aspect of it, and then I turned it into like more of a fashion. So I went into London College of Fashion, and I did a year there just to understand a little bit about how the human body works in clothes. So from there on, and I started working for Nike, completely different. I did shoe design. So we started coloring shoes for all like the bespoke side of things. We color like, also did like collaborations and little like smaller projects for like celebs. We have these small studios that nobody know about. And the more I deep into fashion, well, the more I deep into design, the more I deep into clothes making, I realized that is something I wanted to do. So I set up a small brand. I started making shirts for people. So, and then put like distinctive pockets on it. And then so that was where everyone kind of remember who I am because of those like really bright new and pretty pocket. So everyone that buy those shirts would be like, wow, I love this shirt because it's so distinct. So from there on, I built my career from there, and then I set up the brand called Labrum. And then I did my first collection at London Fashion Week. So that went on, and it grew and it developed to where it is today. So for me, I get inspired by telling my African heritage story from where I am, where I've been, how we've grown from living in Sierra Leone to how we moved to Cyprus and then until we get to England. So I like to tell the story about my life and my family and what it is like to be an African, and also talk about like old African music that people don't talk about. Like my last collection was inspired by High Life, which is like, High Life is, I don't know if you guys know about High Life. It's like a genre that was started back in the 20s through a guy called E.T. Mensah, and then he migrates around West Africa and gets to Nigeria, and it becomes like Afrobeat, and then everyone knows about Fela Kuti. So what I wanted to do was to bring back that story about that guy, which people never talk about because people weren't born around that time, but his story never been celebrated so much. So it's just I'm always touch basing for my African heritage. Like, so we did a collection called High Life Revival. So we celebrate that at London Fashion Week. So yeah, so like I said, for me, it's my life experience is what I used to just to tell a story in fashion. I believe we can get to a wider audience by doing that, because you can't just sit in your room to try and tell your story. A lot of people buy into ideas and understanding the storytelling. And whilst I was at Nike, you get billed to tell a story when you work in Nike. Every product that we put out there has got a story behind it. So I think I got inspired by that, and then hence why every season I do my collection, it's got a story behind it about me or my family or my heritage and things I've gone through in life.
And that's exactly how it should be. Like, I think sometimes people look at a lot of negative stuff when it comes to fashion and don't possibly assume that it is an art form that is developed from cultures and religions, and it's a journey, and it's just as much as an art form as somebody painting a picture per se or making some music. And to go back to the point that most people look at the fashion industry as being, I don't know, tall, skinny models, drugs, unhealthy, all of that kind of image, I think, is perpetuated, especially if you're not within it. But for you guys, my question would be, what do you think for you are the positive aspects of fashion and style? I'll go to you, Harry.
You're always first.
I know.
So much
Okay.
pressure. No, I actually have no. I'm actually fine.
You got this.
No, so I think that what's amazing about social media these days, influencer, blogging and social media has literally blown wide open, fashion. I'm using it in inverted commas, but you can go out and create your own style and put it on Instagram and own it. And I think fashion used to be much more exclusive, and social media has made it inclusive. I don't know what you guys think, and it's definitely in terms of like body size. It's so, like when I was growing up, when I was talking about like my story of being like this highly insecure teenager growing up in like the middle of nowhere countryside, there was no such thing as plus size fashion. There was no like fat women owning it on Instagram that I can go and like be like, oh my god, she looks amazing. Like there was none of that. Like there was just diet plans, and to be happy I must be thin. Like, to be happy I must be thin, and that I can only wear like certain, I can't wear jeans because I'm fat. Like, it was just all sorts of, like, there was rules or perceived rules that you had to be thin to be fashionable and glamorous and attractive and all these kind of things. And I think what's amazing, I mean, obviously there are negatives, and there is definitely a negative impact about Instagram on young people, but the most amazing thing is you can curate the types of images that you are seeing each day, and that can include now a massive diverse range of body shapes and people owning it at every single size that definitely wasn't there before.
Yeah. It's exciting. I think it's a really great time. Things are definitely evolving. I always think that I kind of want everything to move a bit faster. But I feel like if something's going in the right direction, that's at least the start on it kind of thing.
I mean, you must find that with your...
Yeah, I think as well. I think, well, from a marketing like perspective, when I was, you know, my first idea of it, I thought the industry was kind of like recluse. You would only kind of have a job of being like the inside if you kind of know someone. But I think with like social media and everyone just creating their own identity through style and fashion, or whatever their like interests or like skill sets are, you can create your own create like your own CV, your own like portfolio, and people are looking for people that don't have it, you know, like don't have any, you know, like like connections, and have different ways of like marketing themselves and things like that. So that's from that point of view, from like a marketing perspective. And also with like blogging, you can just be you, and I think that's what's really important, and just be authentic to yourself instead of looking at magazines and seeing what someone else is doing.
Or what the next trend is.
Look at your own wardrobe and just be like, do you know what, I'm going to blog this because this is what I feel is nice for me, and someone else will like it, comment it, and then you've got a connection instantly. So I think that's what's really positive about that as well.
You can take ownership over it as well. And for you guys, what do you think the positive aspects are of fashion, style, and we can take that further by fashion and style on Instagram, if you like?
I think a really good positive element to fashion and the style industry is that it celebrates eccentricism. So it celebrates, you know, people who are very different in their expression, which isn't something a lot of young people feel empowered enough to do. Whereas in the fashion world, the wackier you are, the weirder you are, or the more out there you are, is really loved, and you can really be adored for that, where you can be really shunned for that in other places. So I think it's a place that can allow people to easily feel quite empowered in who they are and in their true expression. So I think that's great. And also I think, I don't know, maybe it goes back to something I said earlier, whereas it's finding and aligning yourself with your tribe, so to speak. You know by someone's trousers sometimes, trainers, the way they do their hair, the glasses that they've chosen, and stuff like that.
Good glasses game, by the way.
This was just we had a thing going on. And so I think it really does. Even the fact that you know we have the same glasses and a similar hairstyle.
You'd get on the bus and be like,
right, like we don't know each other very well, but I imagine our music taste crosses over. I imagine we have a lot of the same references, you know, and that's nice to know without having to have a conversation.
It is indeed.
Yeah, I do agree with Aisha on that one. Yeah, for me, it kind of helps me connect people from different backgrounds that probably wouldn't cross path. Say, every time I do a project, I put people together that I know are completely different so that they can connect and chat. And I find out every time I've done a collection, those people tend to stay friends and then they move on. So it's opened a different door to me that I haven't actually seen before. I didn't think I would put different people in one room to work in project and then just connect and be friends. So for me, expressing that and telling stories and connecting with people has been the key for me, is what I wanted to do. It's that network, creators network. We know in London that some people won't cross paths, but sometimes because no one speaks to each other, we don't know what we like. We could probably dress the same way, but we probably have something in common, but because we don't actually eye contact, we don't connect, it doesn't work. So for me, that's why I'm pioneering to just connect and work with different people. Every season I change it around, every time. I think people can express themselves and just pick up a connection from that. Yeah, that's what's working.
It's working for you,
Yeah, definitely.
And then maybe what challenges have you come across in specifically your career, but then mainly maybe the perception of what you do as opposed to what you actually do? What challenges have you come across?
Wow.
Yeah, I like to go in there, you see.
Yeah, I know. I like that question because, yeah, I think there's a perception about branding and fashion. So when people see sometimes, they just look at the glamorous side of it. They don't look at how do you get there? Because I feel like that's what people fail to discuss about these days. All they look at is just like, oh, that brand is so successful, or that designer is so successful. But we go through a lot of challenges, through mental challenges and through like financial challenges. He breaks you sometimes in this industry. That's the reality. It's not negative,
no, trust me.
but that's just the reality. I feel like we need to be responsible to like let the younger kids that's coming to know what they're getting into themselves into, so they set themselves for those challenges so that when it does hit them, they know how to deal with it. That's for me, like I said, there's few challenges. Like one is how you stimulate your mind sometimes to think positively and stimulate your mind to like upbeat yourself. Say for one season you do one thing and people like it, and how do you energize or like get your brain to think positively again, to do another collection that surpassed what you did the season.
And then you're thinking quite far ahead, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're
always,
thinking like kids.
always. So you're just on the edge. You're like, I've done this. People think it's great. What do I need to do next? And also the challenges of like financial challenges is the key to like any successful brand. Don't get me wrong. You can do whatever you want to do, but if you don't have the finance and then have these things in place, it will be difficult for you to achieve that.
Like, do you ever change your mind? Do you ever create something, think, you know what, I love this, and then 6 months later a bit like, yeah.
Yeah. It happens all the time. So, again, as I was saying, you could create this beautiful thing and you work with other people, like stylists, like I should probably know. You could bring a stylist in and then the stylist would just look at it like, this doesn't work. And then you'll have to like probably start a whole thing again sometimes, because it's good to have them in. Before, when I started designing, I'm like, no, I don't want stylists to touch my clothes because I design it for
You
purpose.
know how you want to wear
and I don't
it.
want them to change it around. But what happened is, I realized I'm spending 5-6 months looking at that design. And when I get a stylist in and they look at it for once, they're looking at it from a fresh eye for the first time. And they play with it and move things around. It show you the message that you're trying to put out there so nice and tight and coincide. And you're like, whoa, I never seen this before. Mm-hmm. So that's why every time I do a collection now, there's always going to be a stylist along. And to answer your question about changing things, yeah, you change a million times as you go along. It's like you start a collection and along the way you get inspired by something else, you drop that. You take on the next thing, the next project, you move on, and you realize, okay, this is the path.
Yeah.
So sometimes, yeah, you change a million times.
And then, Aisha, how is your relationship with designers? Like, it's interesting there hearing Vode talk about stylists. How do you navigate that relationship? Do you have a few different designers that you tend to know and work with and get your pieces from? How does that actually work?
Yeah, it is like that. As a stylist, you know, depending on your client and depending on their budget, depending on their record labels, you source clothes from a range of places. So if you're working with someone who specifically wants designer clothing, for me, I like to source new designers or more obscure designers that people don't know about as much, as opposed to going to the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton. As much as that can be cool, but you know, for me and my personal taste, everyone else will be doing it also. So I like to do it like that. And generally speaking, you know, I speak to a lot of students and graduates or fresh graduates, and they're really happy and for the opportunity and stuff like that. So generally the relationship is quite nice in that sense. But one thing that I don't think maybe a lot of people, artists and people who need stylists, know when they start out is that you may become a rapper or a singer, a popular singer, and you may think, well, I've always wanted that Gucci dress, so can you email Gucci for me and can I get that? And it doesn't work like that, you know. Gucci have their own target of who they think is appropriate for them, who they want to champion their brands, and a lot of those reasons for creating that archetype of person that they want aren't necessarily always the most positive. But those are kind of some challenges maybe that I can run into with designers, is that some people that I may work with, although the artist may have the desire and see themselves in the Gucci light, Gucci doesn't.
In the Gucci light.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. All right, we're going to come over this side and, like, I mean, we've got two very different kind of backgrounds here in terms of when it comes to the fashion industry. And I think, like, a lot of the time, people can get quite confused with how many different avenues there are within the fashion industry. Like, for you, Harry, like I was just talking about challenges. I'm assuming that you work with people on a one-on-one basis?
Yeah, so I work mainly with one-on-one or in kind of workshop settings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say is the most common theme that you come across when dealing with these workshops or individuals when it relates to fashion or style?
So I think in relation to fashion and style, it's more to do with confidence, and people don't feel like they have, in my experience, people in bigger bodies often feel like they are meant to only wear clothes that are flattering. Like, only wear things that are flattering. Don't be too expressive. Don't wear anything that's going to make you look like you're taking up too much space. You know, wear black, wear navy. And I know there's some really great plus size fashion now. I'm not even like I'm a plus size advocate. I can't even speak on behalf of women in their big bodies because I'm like an in-betweenie. However, like there's, even though there's much more options now for people in bigger bodies, it's been very closed doors, you know, on how you can express yourself. So for me, it's really getting through to the idea that you don't have to meet this ridiculous imaginary beauty standard in order to fully express yourself.
Do you not think we're getting better?
Yeah, we are, but then
quicker, right?
yeah,
Quicker.
no, we are getting there, but society still, there is still, I talk about diet culture a lot, which is like co-opted into everything, you know, every advert, Love Island, you know, like just everything, you know, that to be thin is the ideal, and that we should all be, if we're not striving to meet this ideal, then, you know, why not? You should be, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of, that's the kind of biggest challenge is getting through to people that you don't have to change yourself in order to be happy and to fully, talking about in this kind of context, to fully express yourself. If you want to wear color and you want to be like wacky and completely, you know, like dye your hair pink, like whatever, like you can do it regardless of what you look like. You don't have to be always waiting for a future point of happiness. You don't always feel like, okay, so when I've dropped a dress size, then I'll buy that dress. Or I'm going to buy that dress 2 sizes too small because then it will be like some bizarre motivator in order to get me to be that thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that's the challenge. It's about confidence. But, you know, and not everyone has the confidence in order to kind of really fully express themselves how they would like to. And definitely it is better than it was, but we still have this beauty standard, you know, that says we have to look a certain way, and that is still very oppressive for lots of people.
Definitely. And then Olivia, as a fashion influencer, what, I'm trying to separate your jobs just to make it linear.
No, for
Yeah,
sure.
no,
I mean,
I agree.
We talk about different things for sure.
Yeah. What would you say the challenges are that you face? Is it, do you seek out brands to promote and feature, should I say? Or is it a case of brands finding you? Like, how does that usually work, and what challenges do you face while you're doing that?
For me personally, I don't actually seek out brands. I think for me, the reason why I started fashion blogging was more of a hobby. It was something that I've always loved to do. So, and I always want to keep that at heart. I don't want to get to the point where I'm seeking and then cutting how I like to be seen or how I like to dress down. I think that's really important to me. And I think through that, there is a challenge in terms of the right perception of an influencer being seen. I think these days, brands, when it comes to it, brands want to make a return of sales, and that's just what it is from a business perspective. And they understand that influencer marketing is just this new groundbreaking thing that has come and taken over fashion, and, you know, like the internet influencers are the new models. That's a whole nother debate. So I think with that, sometimes they kind of miss in terms of getting the right influencers and just getting the influencers that just has the biggest reach.
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of problem, like a problem today. But for me, I always want to keep at the reason why I started blogging. I think if I get too caught up in the politics of the fashion business, then I'll lose my sense of style, I'll lose my authenticity, I'll lose the core of my following and why I even started in the first place. And I won't even like doing it anymore. So I personally don't do that. And I have been fortunate enough to brands to reach out to me, and I think that's been really cool, and I think that is a standpoint to say and a reassurance to always be you. It might not be as fast, it might not be as quick, but at least you're being authentic to yourself, and I think that's what's important at the end of the day. And in time, those results will show.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to be for me. And I think that's what I would encourage other, aspiring influencers or influenced. Be at the core of you. Don't follow the business, because the business will always change.
Yeah. And you'll constantly
Exactly.
be chasing
And
it,
then
won't
what
you?
will
Like,
you do when they switch it around and you'll be like, oh, that's what I used to do. And then you'll be lost. And then your like core following will see that, and then they'll just move to the next influencer. So I think authenticity should always be at the core. Unfortunately, you do get challenges because you're not getting booked, or when they are trying to book you, they're messing around with the budget, and that's all. There's many other politics. But for me, that's why I do have other avenues and interests anyway. And even though I love fashion, I don't want to be a slave to it.
Yeah.
So that's why, as much as I'm an influencer, I always start myself saying I'm a brand marketer first, because I like the business and strategy and like storytelling, and that's why I got into it in the first place.
And that's why I always get people to
Can I
introduce themselves first.
Yeah.
I think on that point, it's really important that it takes a lot of time to discover your style and
Yeah.
who you are. Like, I think that's a really important point, that, it's totally fine if you don't know, like, how you want to express yourself when you're in, like, as a teenager. I think I definitely didn't find my personal style. I don't know about what you guys, I definitely didn't find my personal style till my late 20s.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really important to
Yeah.
give yourself time to discover that stuff.
And I think as well, fashion is always evolving. Your style is always evolving. I even just tweeted like the other day, like what I used to buy and wear, I don't really buy and wear as much.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't know, maybe different stages of my life, things like that. It's just a personal journey.
Yeah, and it's a slow burner, isn't it? I think with the society that we live in today, everyone is so keen to be where they want to be now. It's all now.
Yeah.
That goes in with fast fashion as well, in terms of the Primarks and all the rest of it. Don't get me wrong, I like a bit of Primani. But in terms of, everything is just moving so fast paced, and when you as a person aren't keeping up with that, it's very easy for you to feel like you're slagging behind somewhere, or just like, oh.
There's no such thing as an overnight success.
There's no such thing.
Like, definitely.
Yeah.
There's so much work behind it. So,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point to make. And since we are talking about positive fashion, I feel like an element of that is ethical fashion, sustainability. How do you guys feel about that? Aishat, do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
Sorry.
Close. Yeah, no, I think it's great and only logical, and something that should have always been done. That clothing should be ethical, and it should be. I think if at the moment we're talking about all of the many conversations that are happening in the world, whether that's feminism, whether that's gender, there are so many milestones, and sexuality, there are so many milestones being reached. And I think as long as, we're still quite comfortable for fashion to be very exploitative to other people, I think that's an issue, a major issue. So I'm really happy for it, and I hope that a lot of other brands follow suit with the ecological way of producing clothing now, as well as, gender fluidity within clothing as well, which is also kind of off the back of that. I think these are really positive things.
Definitely.
Yeah, I do agree with Aisha. But also I think a consumer have a key part to play on that as well, because all we want is the now. So there's a lot of pressure of like, I want this now and I must have it now. I think we tend to forget that if we put pressure on the designers and the brands, obviously you're going to go an extreme way to get this stuff to us. So, and also we need to have a responsibility of buying what we need, not what we probably want. And also try to support brands that do things ethically. It can, if we're talking about ethical stuff, yeah, the codes is probably going to be a little bit expensive. Us as a consumer need to take that into consideration and be like, okay, I'm not going to buy too much of this. I'm going to spend probably what I will spend in Primark. I will probably pay 10 or 15 pound more, but that will last you probably 2-3 years where you don't have to actually dump it. So I think we do have, as a consumer, have a key to play in this. That's what I think all the time.
Are you implementing that into your designs?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So now, I'm not saying making clothes in China is the wrong thing. I'm just anti a lot of these things. So I try to make sure I work with like ethical factories, like making sure some of the stuff that I do, I try and find out how it's made so that I don't...
No sweatshops.
Yeah, yeah.
No
So
sweatshops.
it's made in the UK. Most of my stuff is made in the UK. So I always take my consumer through the journey of how the fabric was made and how the garments was made. So I released like little videos and clip snippets of just telling people the story about what it is.
Yeah, where it
So
comes
it's like,
from.
yeah, so just engaging them. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm going to be trying to do in the future, so that people know where it comes from.
Yeah,
Definitely.
people like that. You seemed like you had something to say.
Yeah, I agreeing. I think it's like, it's down, what am I trying to say? So that, I definitely think it's part of the job of the consumer to continue to tell brands that they care. Like, just look at the history of the Fair Trade Network. It was a grassroots network that kind of changed this whole kind of, this whole group of people came together and said, hey, we want things, we're thinking about the farmer, we want things to be paid fair price. And it was the grassroots movement. And I think that perhaps people are caring, but they need to be telling the brands. Like Fashion Revolution is a really great campaign that people can join and just ask, like, who made my clothes, and just, it's really important to keep telling the brands that you care in order to I think we need a bit of a paradigm shift, and obviously I'm not directly working in the fashion industry, but I think everyone knows that there are some...
You're ready to
Yeah,
shift
like,
for
for
us.
sure. Yeah, there is, I think most people are aware, that cheap fashion, who's really paying the price, and you need to keep using your voice to kind of tell the brands that you really care. But you're right, price is a kind of, I think we've got too used to having really, really cheap clothes, and that's where the kind of shift needs to...
As a student, like I said, not interrupting, when I was at uni, before all this Boohoo or whatever they're called popped up, we used to buy stuff from Zara. So obviously, because it was cheaper, or we buy stuff from like H&M. Because as a student, you don't really care, you just want the cheapest, and you're just probably going to wear it for like 3 months or 2 months. You just dump it.
It'll probably fall apart in the washing machine.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Again, your student loan again, you're just going to I think we need to educate people as to like what that costs to the environment, and then slowly people will buy into that idea of like, okay, there's a reason why a designer garments cost X, Y amount, and then people know that, okay, if you do buy that, you spend X amount of money on it, it's going to last you for 2 years, you're not going to dump it somewhere where someone else have to pick up the crap. So I think it's more down to education.
I definitely like this idea of the videos that you said.
Transparency, I think, is really
See
important.
where it's coming from.
Yeah. Transparency is always good. Like, people attention span these days, even when you're doing video, you need to like draw their attention to like key aspects of what you're trying to do. Because we all probably know, people spend like 6 seconds watching a video. Above 6 seconds.
Done.
It's done. So if nothing captivates their eyes at that moment, they're gone. So your message is lost somewhere. So it's all about how we narrate the story to people. I think that will help moving forward.
Definitely. Yeah. And I want to see if anybody has any questions for my fabulous panel. Really? Oh, a few. Hello, what's your question? It's a bloodline. Who would like to go first with that?
I think I knew that it wasn't merely just a passion when I recognized what could be done through fashion, and all the silent messages you could communicate without having to really say anything. I think your body and your clothing and the way you express yourself can also be an act of activism, if you like, or a tool of resistance, if you like. Being able to consciously shop, and as a stylist, it means you have authority on fashion or authority on style. And so I didn't necessarily know many stylists when I started who spoke about style and fashion from other perspectives, other than what they like and what's on trend. But when I knew there was so much more around that industry and the way that you could affect people's lives with that, that's when I decided to do it. When it's, I think maybe for me, like anything that I do in general is like, when I see how it can affect the wider world, you know, whether you're saying it or not, like that's when I knew.
And what about for you, Fode?
Yeah.
That moment of realization.
Moment of realization, yeah. For me, I didn't get into, I hate to call it fashion. For me, it's more I got into the style aspect of it, because I feel like what I'm trying to do is, it's never on trend. So it's just style, and then it's just looking at an individual and be able to just take apart or strip down what was made in like in the 20s or the 50s and make it to something meaningful or something that resonate with me, is what I go into fashion. I wanted to change the way people look at clothes or the way people put clothes on their body. For me, that's the aspect. It's more about the shapes of the garment. So, for example, a trousers is a trousers. So there's not much you can actually do with a trousers. So for me, it's that aspect of trying to change the shape of that particular trouser without distorting certain things. Is the aspect of why I go into fashion, but I tend to call it style, because I'm trying to, my stuff are just classic stuff. So it's not more about the fashion side of things. For me, fashion is like, it's very, very vague and it's difficult. And if you get into fashion, you get lost sometimes. But if you stick with style, it tends to like stay forever. It's like continuity. I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, that's what it is. It's a key, to be honest.
I think for me, my fashion job is like fashion business, so it's more like strategy, like I said before. But I've always personally had an interest in it since I was young. But in terms of when I was considering it as a career, I always wanted to know, through fashion, could I create influence and impact? And that's when I got really interested in like marketing, because I thought that was really important, because that's how you reach the consumer, or how the consumer actually builds a relationship with the brand. So that's kind of how I kind of married my passion and my job together to kind of do what I'm doing now.
And I'll just talk about it from like a personal style perspective. I think probably for me, it wasn't until my kind of late 20s that I really kind of was owning who I was, that I was able to fully kind of start experimenting with, I guess, my individual style. And yeah, as soon as, don't worry about turning 30, kids, it's great.
It's the best thing.
It's the best thing
It's
ever.
awesome. It's awesome.
It's
awesome.
so great. So yeah, you just become more and more kind of certain of who you are. And so yeah, that's kind of my kind of love of style didn't, I guess, blossomed from like my late 20s, as I guess more fashion became a bit more accessible for kind of curvy girls, probably. So yeah.
I actually feel quite inspired to answer the question myself. I might do that. Mainly because I think mine's a little bit of a different answer to you guys. You were saying, like, how do you know from when you just like to dress nice or pick nice clothes to when it's a profession? I think those lines are super blurry. The excitement I get from picking an outfit, that in itself to me, and I also speak saying as well that I see the difference between fashion and style. I definitely get that. But as a model, I always considered myself to work in fashion because it's not me. It's not a reflection of me. It's a reflection of the brand and how they want to portray themselves, which has got nothing to do with how I want to portray myself. So I like to differentiate the two. But I would say styling and style chose me. And if you get that excitement when you go through your wardrobe to pick an outfit, yeah, you've got potential that you could definitely work in that industry. And as I think we've seen as well, there's quite a diverse range of things you can do in the industry. It's not about being a model and a designer and a stylist and then there you go, that's the fashion industry. It's so diverse and there's so many areas. It doesn't even matter what aspects of fashion, or it could just be accessories that you like. There's just the little things can actually turn into quite big business and profitability, and that's without even talking about doing your own personal blog and styling and all the rest of it, speaking from your own perspective. So there's my answer to that one. Any other questions? I'm going to take that as that we did fabulously. Oh, she's got another one.
Yeah.
This is more for Aisha, because
you say?
Yeah.
And I really like the comment, like, I really appreciated it. So my question was, like, regarding with how you dress as a woman,
Mhm.
and I guess with what the perception of what women should dress like,
Mhm.
what's the boundaries you faced in it, and how do you feel like, I guess you can, what's kind of been an issue, kind of trying to express the fact that just because I don't dress like this doesn't mean I'm this or I'm that.
Or I'm
Yeah.
not feminine. Or,
Oh, right. Yeah, I think, I've often thought about femininity a lot. I've had to, because when you don't present yourself like what people think a woman should look like, you're constantly having to assert that you may be a woman. People misgender me all the time. And so I've often had to think about femininity in a way that maybe other people wouldn't, because they take it for granted, potentially, because it's just, they wear it, But I've learned that, for me, I guess femininity, it can't be an outfit. It's an energy. It's a perspective. It's a way of seeing life. It's a way of approaching and doing things. And I think I made that tweet when I was thinking about who decides what it is that women wear and what's male and what's female, at least within a Western context. And from my research and things like that, a lot of what I've come to learn that is expected of women in society was originally created by men. So, looking at an androgynous woman, to me, just from my own personal opinion, then that doesn't have to negate anyone else's femininity who chooses to express themselves in any other way. But I think I'm really inspired by androgynous women, because I think it's really hard in a society where women are constantly told, like, who they should be, how they should look, and this is why your job exists, because women, more so than anyone else, are heavily critiqued, for how they are and what they should be. And, I'm mainly a menswear stylist because, working with women as a stylist, you're not just their stylist, you are their therapist, you're this, and so many things, because you have to deal with so many of their body issues. And it doesn't matter that they're stick thin, a lot of the time. It doesn't matter that those issues, because of how the world treats them, still get to them. And so, yeah, I think, like I said, if I go back to how your body can be a tool of resistance and how you present yourself, for me, I'm just unwilling to let male ideas tell me what a woman is.
Definitely. Yeah. I think we can end that on a round of applause, because I'm stimulated. Woo! Thank you